G'day everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. So today I'm going to be going over and grading every AFL team's season for 2024. It's a video we like to do every single year, pretty straightforward. We'll sit back and have a chat about each team's season and give them a grade with how they went. And we like to grade off teams' expectations most importantly. And of course we want to be honest but also harsh with these grades. So feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you do go on to enjoy today's video. And let's get straight into it. Okay, so let's start off with the Adelaide Crows, and we usually like to talk about the team first and then give them a grade right at the end, but I'll just give the team the grade right away and then give my explanations. So the Crows, one of the more disappointing teams of 2024, no doubt, and for me, it just has to be a D grade, a big fat D grade for Adelaide's season. Coming into this year, they're one of the more hyped up teams given how good their season was last year. They had one of the best percentages in 2023 and didn't make the finals. The Ben Keays moment as well cancelled them out on making a finals campaign. They had a very good forward line, efficient, high octane. Taylor Walker had a nut season. It felt like the Crows could really build off that 2023 season and go out and boss it, and I had them for the top four, but it just wasn't to be. What really exposed the Crows this year is not only their just inconsistent brand of football, but also the off-the-field stuff, like their administration and their lack of really good player development. A lot of supporters throughout the season calling out the incompetence within the four walls of the footy club and the board and etc. Matty Nicks under the pump once again this year. On the field results, again, as I said, very inconsistent football. They start off the year, I think, 0-3. They kicked literally 4 goals against the Dockers. They could not move the footy to kick off the year. They had some good wins, and they were able to get the ball rolling somewhat, but just way too inconsistent. A lot of players had down years too. Walker, his age started to show. Laird, geez, he had some poor games. Dawson sort of stagnated this year too. And the cherry on top on what is a figurable season for the Crows is what happened with Josh Rochelle. I mean, geez, it looks like within the four walls of the footy club, it just isn't a very merrily place, and I think the chemistry is definitely one of the biggest issues for the Crows this year. But expectations still going to be sky high for Adelaide, no doubt. Next year they're going to be picking up some solid recruits, Peatling, also Neil Bulling, 𝐼𝐴𝐴𝐿𝐼𝐴𝐿 Cumming, and the expectations is still going to be the Crows with their list should be pushing for top 8, given this is their 8th or 9th year now in a rebuild. But yeah, poor year for the Crows, a D grade. We now move on to the Brisbane Lions, and in one of the more resilient seasons you'll ever see out of any side, it just has to be an A+ for the Brisbane Lions. The premiers of 2024 and how they did it was just unbelievable. Starting off the year 0-3, Chris Fagan under heavy amounts of pressure. They had the Las Vegas saga a few weeks into the season as well. And then they just had a huge amount of injuries. Lincoln McArthur going down, Gardner going down, Kitty Coleman also going down. A lot of big knee injuries. But what was sort of able to happen and what turned into a bit of a beneficial scenario was with those players going down because of Brisbane's depth, players like 𝐓𝐴𝐿𝐼𝐴 was able to move behind the footy. All-Australian season. Kyle Lohman, in and out of the side. Talented player. Always had great numbers in the VFL. He came in, breakout year. Logan Morris was another one of those youngsters that were able to come in early. And that was a really good, I thought, act from Chris Fagan. Blooding the youth as early as possible in the season. Because their season was sitting at a crossroads. So it was a really good decision from Chris Fagan to get a few of those youngsters in as early as possible. And how about that? Kyle Lohman, Logan Morris, a lot of those youngsters. Will Ashcroft too. What a second half of the season he was able to produce when he came in. And it just everything clicked. The Stars were able to really ramp it up and produce high amounts of consistency. And it was just that perfect premiership runway for the Lions. They just kept on charging and played in what was just a spectacular final series. 44 points down against the Giants. Able to get the game on their terms, win that game. One of the best prelim finals you will ever see out of any team. Just resilience. It just simply, that is the best way to describe Brisbane's season. We always know the Lions have talent, but with the negatives and the circumstances they went through, for them to lift up the cup out of the end of it is just remarkable. So A+ for the Lions. What a year they have had. We now move on to the Carlton Football Club, and I'm going to be giving their season grade a C-. There was a lot of high expectations on the Blues coming into 2024. A lot of people had them for the top 4. Some even had them for the premiership. I myself was a little bit sceptical. I just felt like people probably overrating the Blues a little bit coming into this season. And I had them for the finals, and they ended up making it Carlton. So it isn't a failed season. I think for any team making finals football is very difficult. But it felt like they somewhat overachieved because they had just a bit of that momentum surge to make a prelim in 2023. And then what happened this year is they started well, they're sitting in the top 4, and it's similar to like Essendon, they just came crushing down. And look, they had injuries. Let's be real here. 𝐼𝐴 𝐼𝐿𝐼, he just had a few niggles here and there, and then he had the a big injury problem. Then he was out for majority of the last few rounds of the season. Also, Mackay in and out of the side. Sam Walsh had a delayed start of the season too. And even their brand of football just really soured out towards the back half of the year. I thought their defensive work at ground level in the back 50s, what really let them down. Their ball movement was pretty inconsistent. They were getting beaten in their own good game of that heavy contested style. That's what the Blues really like too. So as I said, wouldn't say it's a failed season. I would not give the Blues a D grade because they still were able to make the finals, and it was a credit to them in the end, given the just an absolute exodus amount of injuries they had in the back third of the season. So still in the C grade, but a minus because it just was still a disappointing way to end their year, given they were in the top 4, I think, around the buys. So a C minus for the Blues. Now moving on to the reigning premiers heading into 2024, Collingwood, and I'm going to be giving their grade for 2024 a C minus as well. Now, it's pretty straightforward. They missed the finals and they were the reigning premiers in 2024, so you'd feel like, okay, what's a favourite season? But when you look into it a little bit more, they were an Errol Goulden goal away from making the top 8, quite literally. But they still played some poor footy in the first half of the year, and they just weren't able to chalk up enough results, and that's also to blame too. They started off the year really poorly, starting off 0-3. They just couldn't really get their brand going. Last year, they were so deadly when they were able to move the footy through the ground, and their forward half game was deadly, especially when the ball hit the deck. Their small forwards were key to that. But to start off the year 0-3 and getting killed off the turnover, lethargic defending, it just was a classic premiership hangover. What I also felt is just a lot of teams were able to go to homework on the Pies. They found ways to really defend their ball movement well and catch them off the turnover. And a big factor on why I have the Pies in a C grade here, giving them the C minus, is because like Carlton, they had injuries. Tom Mitchell went down. 𝐷𝐿𝐼 wasn't able to have a full season. He's key to their success, Jordan 𝐷𝐿𝐼. So him out for the side for the most part of the year did hurt. 𝐼𝐿𝐼𝐿 was also in and out. McStay had a delayed season too. So even though it wasn't a successful season for the Pies, because of those injuries, and they were still very close on making the top 8, I'll give them the C minus. But it does have to be said, there still is a bit of uncertainty with how they will go in the next few seasons. Will they bounce back, or will they just sort of stagnate where they are? Because they were found out quite a bit on the field this year. So Pies, C minus. We now move across to Bomberland, the Essendon Football Club, and I'm going to be giving their grade a C minus as well. Just like Carlton, they were sitting, second place? I'm pretty sure it was around the bye mark of the season. They had that big win over Collingwood and things were looking fine and dandy. But look, to be fair, a lot of supporters were just predicting this because it just happens all the time. Essendon in the second half of the season just come crashing down, and that's exactly what happened again in 2024. But if we do want to put a positive spin on it, it was more of a successful season than 2023. They had a very bad back half of the year, the Bombers, and they ended up finishing in the bottom 6. But at least Essendon were able to gain ladder positions in 2024, and they started the season really well. Their midfield numbers were some of the best in the competition. Zach Merritt was on fire, and their clearance game was definitely where it was at. I think it was top 4 early on in the year. They were also aided with players having some breakout years. Sam Durham, loved his season. Just his inside and also outside balance is what I really enjoyed about his year. What a pickup he's been as a mid-season recruit. And Caldwell made some really promising steps this year too. They brought that Essendon edge. They looked a lot more physical in the first half of the year. Had some big results, but it just felt like clockwork. Essendon were going to come crashing down, and in the end, they just ran out of petrol tickets. That's probably the best way to describe their season. They just weren't able to produce enough consistency and get their brand going strong throughout all 24 weeks of the season. Their potency inside 50 really let them down in the back half of the season too. Efficiency was just totally out the window. It's what cost them a lot of games too. So still a C grade because they were sitting in the top 4 halfway through the year. And look, I don't want to give them a D grade because they ended up missing the finals. It still were a lot of positives to take out of the Don season, but it's just another same old. A second half of the season collapse from Essendon. How will they go next year? It's a bit of a mystery, but just a C minus for me for the Bombers. At least they improved this year from 2023. Across now to the Fremantle Dockers, and one of the more improved teams in 2024, but they still ended up missing finals. So I'm going to be giving them a C plus. but they really should be higher. They let's be real here, they should have made the top 8, but just how they fell out of the finals in those final few games of the season. They had the losses to the Cats and then also to Port Adelaide, and geez, that one against Essendon, I wish they could have had back as well. That one really did hurt them. They choked that one too. So the best way to look at it is they just weren't able to capitalise in key moments. And look, I feel like they'll definitely learn off that. They are a very talented side with a really strong young core, and they had some awesome players this year. Hayden Young's impact for the ball was excellent as the season did grow on. So did Brayshaw. Thought his form really picked up. Strong was fantastic all year long. Josh Tracy, breakout year. And there's just so many promising young players. Even 𝐓𝐻𝐿 was able to play some consistent game time because he's always had injuries left, right and centre. Luke Ryan, All-Australian. Draper even came into the side, had some big games like against the Swans. And throughout the majority of the year, Fremantle's stoppage game was some of the best in the competition. When they won stoppage, they're usually winning games of football. But what let them down is when they weren't winning that era of the game, they usually did lose games of football. And some of their ball movement was a little bit inconsistent again this year. But as I say again, they're a talented team, and they're probably going to be getting Shea Bolton and Liam Baker as well into their side, which I think could be real game-changing players for them next year. The expectations for the Dockers have to be finals or even top 4. Talented team. I'm excited to see how they go next year. But yeah, Dockers supporters still going to be very disappointed with how they ended off that year. But could be a blessing in disguise, because when you're just so close from making the finals or winning a final, you can come out next year and go bang. So C+ from the Dockers. A lot of promising signs, but given how they ended off the year, just can't be giving them a B grade. And now for the Geelong Football Club. And geez, does this team always prove a lot of people wrong. Going to be given the Cats an A grade. Outstanding season. They have had a kick away from making the grand final, where a lot of people had them for the bottom 6. I had the Cats making the finals myself, but I just felt like they were a bridge too far to win a flag. But in the end, given how poor the Swans were in the grand final, if they beat the Lions, they probably would have won the flag. So there you go. How crazy is that? But I think heading into this year, how would their veterans hold up and how would their young players go? There's a bit of unknown with that, but Cat supporters, to their right, they are always really bullish about their youngsters, and how about that? Ollie Dempsey, rising star, great year on the wing. Also, I thought Ollie Henry had another really promising and solid year too. Shannon Neal, good back half of the season too. Tanner Bruin and Max Holmes, breakout year, All-Australian, thought he was superb. They started off the year really well, 6-0. They had a bit of a lull throughout stages of the year, or that middle part of the season. Their midfield was getting well exposed, but I felt what really was able to hold the team together was Paddy Dangerfield's impact in the second half of the year. With him out there when he came back from the hamstring injury, when he was in there, he was able to win so much clearance. And the Cats actually turned into a very good ball-winning side in their ground level game, and all their numbers in the contest really stood up heading into the finals. And how about that? Massive win over Port Adelaide. A kick away from making the grand final in the end. It's just another season from the Cats where you just have to sit back and admire how good their footy club is, how well run their football club is. And hey, Evan Lawson-Humphries too. Just, yeah, they had some really promising young players this year. I think Zach Guthrie as well. I know he's not young anymore really, but he's underrated too. A bit of a youngster, I guess you can say. He was second in the best and fairest. So just always such a well-drilled side, the Cats. A well-balanced team. They had breakout players from some youngsters, and some of the veterans really held up well this year. Of course, Jeremy Cameron, another All-Australian. So for the Cats, quite simply, an A grade for 2024. Gold Coast Suns now we move on to next, and it's pretty straightforward. Just another D grade for the Suns here in 2024. There is high hopes for them once again heading into this year. Damien Hardwick at the wheel, so a lot of people were excited. A handful of people had them saying they're going to finally do it. They're going to finally make top 8 in 2024, and it isn't a B. So yeah, a D grade for Gold Coast. Just another season missing the 8s, but this season was, you definitely want to be optimistic, I feel, on Gold Coast season, because it actually was their best season in club history. So because of that, I sort of want to give them a D+. But then when you think about it, some of the losses they had, geez, the Waves losing to North Melbourne. I thought one of the more embarrassing losses was against the Eagles away from home. Just some spineless performances. But at home, geez, they were strong. They won every single game up until losing the 𝐓𝐞𝐞 clash against the Lions. So they had some big performances, but at the same time, what hindered them is some shocking losses away from home. They just could not win away from home, and then they were finally able to do it with the kick after sign with Mac Andrew. And yeah, they had some breakout players too. Mac Andrew, big deal he signed on now. He was able to play both ends of the ground really well. I thought Sam Collins here was outstanding too. He honestly could have made the All-Australian. He was putting up some great numbers, solid week in, week out. Sam Flanders, very consistent season, played a bit of halfback, but surely hard work keeps him in the middle next year. And that's going to be the big thing for Gold Coast, what happens next year. I feel like when you look at Damien Hardwick, this is now, he's going to be his first full pre-season. He's in charge as well on the list changes he wants to make. He knows what to get out of the squad now with his first season at the helm. So it's big expectations for Gold Coast next year. Surely they can make finals. Hardwick has high hopes on them. So yeah, keen to see how they go next year, the Suns. But bit of good, bit of bad for Gold Coast, but still no finals campaign. So it's a D grade because just is another failed year. Now move across to the GWS Giants, and I'm going to be giving their season grade a B+, solely because they went out in straight sets. And geez, how embarrassing was that? Deary me. Yeah, I felt second-hand embarrassment, and I felt a bit of sympathy even for them. I know I'm a Sydney supporter. Sympathy for GWS. I have a soft spot for the Giants, but for them to go out in straight sets when they were leading lines by 44 points, and they were a class above the Swans, I felt, especially in the cold face and the pressure game in that qualifying final too. For them to drop both those games going straight sets, it's just quite simply embarrassing. But there is still a lot of good to come out of GWS season. Another top 4 finish, which is very good. A lot of people had them for the flag this year, so the expectations and the pressure I felt was pretty high, and they started off the year very well. They had a few inconsistent performances here and there, and there was a few players like Toby Green wasn't able to get the best out of him this year, but Tom Green went to another level this year, just continues to rack up the football. Lard Finn Callahan's year just continues to improve his numbers across the wing and also floating the midfield. Whitfield as well finally had a fully injury-free year, All-Australian, and Jesse Hogan was the star of the show, kicked over 70 goals, and how reliable was he? It was almost like he was too reliable. It was like it was Jesse Hogan or bust almost with how their forward line was working. It was such a great mark inside 50 this year and a reliable set shot, one their best and fairest. Their pressure game was some of the best in the competition too, and their ball movement was good some games, ordinary other times throughout patches of the year. But for the most part, the Giants still a damaging team. They're a very strong team defence, and they had another top 4 finish. So definitely in the B grade, but they should have at least made a prelim final and honestly pushed on towards a grand final. So straight sets, that knocks them down towards a B+. Now move across to the Hawthorn Football Club, and this is pretty straightforward. I think we all know what grade we have to give the Hawks here. One of the most exciting and one of the more improved teams, or in fact the most improved team of 2024. It has to be an A+. Sam Mitchell, look, you can still make the case he's been coach of the year. Deservedly, though, it does go to Chris Fagan. But Mitchell, what he was able to do when the Hawks were 0-5, when they lost that game against Gold Coast, still remember midweek, he was getting grilled a bit in the media. And you heard some players come and said, well, we're going to have to bring our mouth guards to training. Finally got their first win over North Melbourne, and that's what really kick-started it. They were just able to really grow some consistency. And what really boosted them was just their strong team morale and chemistry, how they're able to move the footy and chain possessions together was some of the best out of any other side. Playing on the same wavelength too. A lot of young, exciting players, had some breakout years. Ginnivan was outstanding. How about Nick Watson's year? It was remarkable. Some of his goals, just his ability to win the ball ground level, his pace. Such an exciting player to watch. Connor McDonald, another really underrated player, I feel, in Hawthorn's forward half setup too. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 was great behind the ball. Sicily, a bit of injuries here and there, but made some really strong impact behind the ball in the second half of the year. 𝐓𝐿𝐿𝐿 started off the year a bit slow, but really got his numbers up. Will Dave was awesome as soon as he came back into the side. Worpel, pretty consistent year from himself, and just such a well-balanced team, Hawthorn. For the veterans were able to play their part. Gunstead came back to the Hawks and kicked over, I think, 25 goals. Chol was an awesome recruit, also kicking over 30 goals, near 40, I'm pretty sure it was. And their brand really stood up. Their ground level game was dangerous. They had the highest amount of points for, I think, since the bye or something like that. So honestly, they could have gone all the way towards a grand final. But for them to be a kick away from a prelim, given they started off 0-5, it is an awesome season for the Hawks and just simply has to be an A+. How they go next year, their brand stood up towards the top teams of the comp, so you never know. The sky's the limit with this Hawks team. Just so many exciting young players they had on board this year, and just such really high amounts of team chemistry when you look across all facets of the ground for the Hawks, so an A+. I now move across to the Melbourne Football Club, and one of the more, or if not the most disappointing team in 2024, no doubt. And I'm just going to have to give them a D-, because when we're looking at teams' expectations, Melbourne, this is a side that pushes for top 4, that strives for success, that's in their window too. And for them to finish a spot out of the bottom 4. And look, I know Christian Petrarca's injury was a huge part for them finishing in the bottom 5, and if he was back out there, they could have probably still pushed for finals. And they had a few close losses sprinkled in there too, the Ds. And just what happened off their field, geez, it was big distractions, dramas they had off the field with certain players, and what happened to Petrarca with the medicals not treating them well enough. It just was a total mess for Melbourne this year, and their depth also got really exposed with a few players going down too, and their brand just was pretty ordinary as well. This was a side, Melbourne, the last few years, where defence and contest, those are the two areas of the game where it really stacks up, and it's some of the best in the comp. But they were killed off the turnover game this year. They were pretty average in that. They got eaten alive in the contested ball, contested game as well. I think they were bottom 6 for those numbers too, and their defence well exposed throughout most parts of the season. So it's just an ugly season for the Ds. On the field, couldn't get it done. Just not consistent enough. Players going down with injury, but off the field, just so many dramas. And it continues Melbourne as well with what's happening with the CEO and also the president, pretty sure getting replaced, and still a bit of this Oliver saga going on. By the time we're recording this video, they have acquired another top 10 pick with a trade for the Dons. So I've really got to try and nail this draft. And look, they had some good young players too. I thought Tholstrup had some decent games. Windsor looked like a shining light in his first season too. But there's just not really a whole heap to cheer about with the Demon season as a whole, so it just has to be a D- for the Ds. Next team up, North Melbourne, and we're going to be giving them a D grade. Pretty straightforward here. They've finished another year in the bottom 3, so this is a side that, come on, are they going to finally start getting the ball rolling here? Alistair Clarkson's pretty much, first full season under the helm, because with the racism saga last year wasn't able to fully manage the team, or coach the team, sorry. So we all thought, well, some optimistic supporters thought, finally, this could be the year where we could see North out of the bottom 4. But still looking at their list, especially the more over 25-year-old range of their list, they're just not good enough. That's what really let them down. They had some promising youngsters this year. Wardlaw had some big games, hurt by concussion though. And how good was 𝐼𝐴𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐿's year? I thought he was awesome, just producing a highly consistent season with high numbers, and floated into the midfield where a lot of pundits were pushing for it. It happened, and geez, how good was he? Just such a smooth mover. Lucky for the ball. Another really strong impact from him in 2024. They had games this year where they really shock opponents. They honestly should have won against Melbourne and Collingwood. And they had, games where the clearance game really stood up. 𝐿𝐿𝐼, best and fairest. He was brilliant this year on being able to just exit stoppage and really show some impact in centre bounces. But just that senior era of their list still does really let them down in my eyes. It just doesn't really... There's just a bit of that lack of leadership I still feel for North Melbourne, and when you look at it from a 24-week perspective, are they good enough to get enough wins? It just feels like probably not. So it's going to be a big year for them though next year. They've acquired Luke Parker, and they're going to go to the draft once again. So could they finally see themselves out of the bottom 4? They wanted to try and, of course, build a winning culture this year. And look, they made some steps this year, the Kangas, but still 17th in the end. So it still is a bit of a disappointing year to not get out of the bottom 2. So a D grade for the Kangas. We now move on to the Port Adelaide Football Club. And just like GWS, I'm going to be giving their grade a B+. Not quite similar like the Giants. They didn't go out in straight sets, but it was more of, well, their season was at the crossroads, and they were able to their credit, with Ken Hinkley under the pump, come out and have a really strong second half of the year. Their last 6 or 7 games was very good. Their defence was in really good check, and their midfield was able to really ramp it up. Jason Horne-Francis, outstanding year. He was one of very few players to average over a goal and 20 disposals. He was really good to watch this season. Zach Butters, another best and fairest. And they got their ball movement and forward half game humming nicely right until the eve of finals. And then it just fell apart once again a wee bit. They finished second place, and that's definitely a positive light I definitely want to shine on when looking at Port Adelaide, because this is another year where a lot of people write off Port Adelaide with the straight sets exit they had, and Ken Hinkley just under so much pressure. But for them to end up in second is definitely a success that you want to acknowledge, no doubt. But yeah, for them to go out in the qualifying final by 84 points against the Cats, it just showed, well, this team just cannot get it done come finals. And you speak to and you hear from a lot of diehard Port supporters, they know that their team is good enough to go all the way. But what's letting them down? They just fell apart in finals again. They were able to rally around and, let's be honest, play their grand final against the Hawks and really able to take away their strengths. But yeah, they just ran out of petrol tickets in that prelim against the Swans. So a B+ because they still made the top 4, a successful season. But once again, we want to be harsh for these grades. they're a side that should be pushing for a grand final with their list they have, and they had big recruits this year. Thought Jordan Sweet was great in the back half of the year. �𝐸𝐴𝐶𝐞, yeah, he had some meh moments, but overall, really strong season to pair up with 𝐼𝐗𝐼𝐿𝐼𝐿. They just weren't able to get it done once again in the final series, so because of that, a B+ for their season. Now move on to the Richmond Football Club, the Wooden Spooners for 2024, and it just quite simply has to be a D-. I could give them a D grade just because of the huge amount of injuries they had. It was looking very bad throughout stages of the year, like they were struggling to fill plays, and in the end they only had one player in the whole list that didn't get a debut. But still, it just has to be a D- because they picked up 2 wins for the season. And when you compare that to some of the worst teams in the modern era, that is very bad. 2 wins of a season. You look at those wins, the upset win over the Swans, that looked very good. And look, the Tigers started the year pretty well, been off their opening round performance, but they got within a goal against the Blues, and they won against the Swans. They were able to play some games where they were able to really bring their ball movement and really match opposition teams in the coalface and even win the contested game quite well. But just as the season grew on, the injuries built and they just had too much reliance on a lack of inexperienced young players. This was the issue coming into this year for the Tigers. How that lack of exposure with their youth go in season 2024. And yeah, their depth really did get struck. And as the season grew on, they just were playing some ugly footy. Weren't able to play consistent 4-quarter efforts. The midfield throughout the year was a bit of a debacle. Some of their ball movement and connection for the ball was just a total mess as well. So a season to forget, no doubt, for the Tiger supporters, but it's going to be a big off season. It's looking like they could have up to 5 first-round selections come up in this draft. So they're in the process of turning over their list. They just need elite young players into this side. So it just has to be a D- though for the Tigers, the Wooden Spooners, for 2024. We now move across to the St Kilda Saints, and I'm going to be giving their grade for season 2024 a solid C. Look, heading into this year, I thought a lot of people would agree with this. They did overachieve, the Saints, in 2023. Yes, they made finals, and they were one of the more improved teams under Ross Lyon with his first year back at the Saints. But just with how they played, it just felt like, were they able to replicate the season they had? Because looking at their numbers, they had one of the lowest points for in 2023, and it just felt like they're just not they're just not much of a dangerous side for the ball, and you need a high-octane forward line, and you need to be a high-scoring side to get up there and chalk enough wins. And the first half of the season was a pretty big disappointment. They just had a lot of games where they weren't able to put up enough points, and they were playing some boring football too. A lot of their supporters are calling out for it. They just had this slow, defensive-minded build-up play instead of really taking the game on. I mean, that loss against the Hawks, I do remember, they just kept on chipping it sideways, and that loss to the Dons too. They just weren't able to really take the game on, score enough points throughout multiple stages of the year. But then on the other side of it, when you do look at it, they have a pretty strong team defence, no doubt, and their ability to move the footy from the back half is some of the best in the competition. In the end, they had one of the highest amount of points from the back half, so they're pretty good at being able to move the footy, and they had a lot of close losses by under a goal or under 2 goals, I'm pretty sure it was. So there's upside, and why I'm giving them a C grade, not anything lower, is their second half of the year was promising. As I say again, their ball movement was very dangerous. That's what outdid the Swans and outdid the Cats, especially under Lid at Marvel. Those were some big wins, so they ended off the season pretty well, knocked off the Blues too. So how will they go next year? They've got some good solid young players. I feel can 𝐸𝐵𝗶𝗶 have a really consistent 2025. He was awesome when he came back and played as that full midfielder after having a spell in the twos. Liam Henry and Paddy Dow, big recruits for them heading into this year. Injury interrupted seasons too. 𝐼𝐴𝐿𝐼𝐿 Miller are going to be another year older, so how will he go when he progresses with age? And they're going to have 2 top 10 picks as well, so they could get some elite youngsters in there. So there's still some hopeful things and still some exciting things when you look at the Saints, but they've just got to become more of a scoring press and a bit more of a damaging side with how they move the footy. It feels like a wee bit too, because that's what really hurt them, their inability to put up enough points, and that's why they ended up finishing mid-tables. So just a C grade for the Saints. Now moving across to the Sydney Swans, and it is just the same old for the Swannies, unfortunately. As a Sydney supporter, it's a grand final I like to forget with the Swans going down with another damning grand final result. It's their 4th grand final loss in 10 years, so I don't want to tear down the walls and say, oh, it's an F grade season or anything, because the Swans still had a great year. So I'm going to be giving them an A- because they were the minor premiers and they were the benchmark for most part of season 2024. They were 12 or 13-1, and then finally they had that loss against the Dockers, and yeah, then they started to have a bit of a slump, and yeah, their contested game and some of their ball movement just was not good enough as the season wore on. They had some poor losses. The Dogs outdid them in the coalface, and then the walls fell apart. It felt like with that 112-point loss against Port Adelaide, where the game just looked like completely, just simply foreign to the Swans players out there on that Saturday night. But they were able to regroup, bank enough wins, make the finals, have some... some of that finals performance in the end from the Swans was just elite in that fourth quarter. They wanted it more against the Giants. They got the win. And then just a game where they had it on their terms with strong ball movement and execution off the turnover against Port Adelaide. But just the same old in the grand final. So even though the Swans weren't able to get the chocolates in the end, they still made some really big strides this year. As I said again, they became the benchmark and were the minor premiers, and the recruits they brought over, James Jordan, 7th in the best and fairest. Brodie Grundy, top 5 in the best and fairest. Big impact this year. Taylor Adams still played 19 games. Thought he was awesome for the most part. Just couldn't squeeze in there. And yeah, just so many outstanding players this year. Isaac Keating, one of the best players in the comp. Gould, another All-Australian. Chad Warner, over 35 goals for a midfielder, is elite. And that was so good about the Swans this year. Just their impact and their ability to get so many goals from a heavy amount of players. It wasn't just a heavy reliance on a one player when hitting the scoreboard. There's just so many individual goal scorers that can hurt you. And in the end, their forward line did let them down though with that 3-tall setup, and it's a bit suspect. That's now going to be coming under, I think, a bit of the spotlight heading into next year, how the 3-talls go. But given the Swans were the minor premiers and they made some great strides this year, they had some breakout players and some superstar performances from a lot of players across their best 22. It's got to be still an A grade, so an A- for the Swans, given they did lose another grand final. Now for the West Coast Eagles, and I'm going to be giving their grade a D+. Yeah, it was a season, I think, to be proud of if you are an Eagles supporter. Like myself, a lot of people had the Eagles with a wooden spoon. There was questions on how would they go this year, and look, just like any of the bottom 3 sides, there were some awful losses they had this year, but at the same time, we want to look at the positives, especially with the bottom 3 side. Riley Reid, what an impact he had in his very first season. He was a literal game changer in some of those games. You look at the win over the Demons, he got the goal of the year. The win over Fremantle, he had another really strong performance there too. So that's a major scalps, and we're able to finally push out of the bottom 2. Elliot Yeo, Jeremy McGovern, for the most part, had injury-interrupted seasons, and McGovern got back to his best All-Australian calibre year, and Yeo was really good in the first half of the year. He was excellent, being able to win plenty of clearance for them. So heading into this year, it was a big factor for the Eagles. If they wanted to succeed, they just needed to tick off results, and that's exactly what they did. They banked more wins in 2024 and were able to get out of the bottom 2. So it's still a D grade because it's the bottom 3 season. They had some just terrible and insipid performances, like against the Dogs early in the year, and even up until almost getting done by 100 points at halftime, I think it was, against the 𝐓𝐻𝐿. So it's got to be a D grade, but a D+, given there were a lot of things to hang your hat on if you're an Eagles supporter in season 2024. And as always, we finish off with the Western Bulldogs, and I'm going to be giving their season grade just a C. That's just how I look at the Dogs' season. Look, I could be a bit harsher and give them a D, but they still made finals, and look, it's always hard for each team to make finals football, and the Dogs, they started the year pretty ordinary. A lot of people were writing them off, including myself, if I'm brutally honest, but they were able to steer the ship around the right way and get the results and tick them off and get into another finals campaign. But if we want to look at the Dogs harshly, this is a side that honestly could be playing top 4 football. Look at the stars they have. Look at some of the young stars they have as well. 𝐼𝐗ₐ, Sam Darcy, Riley Sanders had some good games to kick off the year, but just had the lack of a tank to have a full year in the ones. And as the season did grow on, they were just able to get back to their strengths. Midfield dominance, Bontempelli, Treloar, what a great year he had. Liberatore was consistent as ever. They were able to pick up a lot of wins in the second half of the year just through dominance of their midfield and being able to win first possession and get a lot of points off stoppage, though their numbers, points off stoppage, was very good as the season grew on. I think it was, in the last 6 weeks, some of the best in the competition. Rory Lobb's move to defence was a great move by Luke Beveridge too. His intercept numbers were up there in the back half of the year, and if they didn't have Rory Lobb playing in that Elam final, they probably would have lost that game by over 70 points. So the intercepting game really improved. They were dominant in the air, the Dogs, and they were looking like one of the premiership contenders when you looked at the numbers. Like Champion Data had them for the flag, I'm pretty sure. Squiggle rated them highly too. But it's just the same old Dogs. When the spotlight's on them, when the pressure's on them, they just cannot get it done. But when they're sort of under the radar, they can get the results where a lot of people are writing them off. So better good, better bad. So I'm going to be giving them a C, because there was a bit of mixed expectations on the Dogs heading in this year. People written them off, but people had them for the top 4. So yeah, spin it how you like it. Would you put them a little bit lower? That's fair enough. But for me, the Dogs, there was a bit of good, bit of bad. So a C grade for me. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is me having a chat about each team in season 2024 and giving every team a grade. So as always, feel free to let me know your thoughts about any team you'd like in the comments down below. Would you change some of the grades? That's totally fair enough. These always spark up a bit of debate, so I love to hear your opinions down below in the comments. It's a pretty lengthy video, this one, but when you think about it, there's 18 teams, and I like to have a chat about each side and my thoughts on their season and giving a grade on each team. So if you did go on to enjoy today's video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. That'd be heavily appreciated. And until next time, I will talk to you later. See you later, fellas.